Hello, everyone. As I'm going deeper into my study on what the future holds for all of us, I am delighted to have with us Professor Charles Elkan, who is a professor in the Computer Science and Engineering Department at the University of California in San Diego. His primary research interests lie in machine learning and data sciences. He has a PhD from Cornell University in computer science and has spent time at Amazon in Seattle working on building and leading Amazon's central machine learning team, and has also worked in New York at Goldman Sachs as MD and the global head of machine learning. I had the privilege of listening to Professor Charles' lecture at a conference very recently, and he was here visiting India, and I was so blown away by his ideas and the depth of research that he's already done. I requested him to do this, and literally on one email, he replied back saying he'd be happy to. So, my deepest gratitude to you, Professor, for agreeing to do this interview and sharing your insights with so many people who are going to benefit from all the years of research you've put into this field. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, terrific. All right, so Professor, let's, as we get, as we think about, the future and what the future holds for us in your capacity, both as an academic as well as a founder of an organization, like why think about the future? Why is it important to keep an eye on what the future holds? Why even have this conversation?
I think it's very important because the one thing that we know for sure is that the future is going to be different from the present. There's this saying that the only constant is change, and we need to adapt to it. Even the dinosaurs were around for 100 million years, but then the world changed, and birds and mammals adapted better. And the speed of change is far greater nowadays, but nobody can expect to be doing the same job even in the middle of their career that they have at the beginning of their career.
Okay, so you're saying like the world changed, the way the world as we knew it changed, but forget 100 million years, even of a lifespan of 70 or 80 years, what the way you perceive change is quite radical. Okay, and in your capacity as co-founder of your organization, how are you looking at the future, and how are you sort of navigating the future and what's going to happen in your startup?
Well, nobody can predict the future. So one of the best ways, maybe the best way of trying to anticipate the future is to look at current trends and to see whether they're going to continue or whether there's a reason why they might come to an end. And I think one trend that absolutely is not coming to an end is the trend of greater automation. Software is doing more and more things that humans used to do. And humans are using software to do part of their job. And so every job is changing because the tools that we're using to do the jobs are changing.
Okay, so software is becoming more and more rampantly used. Okay.
Yes.
Any examples of industries where you're seeing software being used? Are you seeing software come in, or software is being used, it's been used for so many years now, but are you seeing examples of companies that are now using software or AI to completely replace functions that were ordinarily being done by humans, or any changes coming in the future?
But typically functions don't get completely replaced, and certainly don't get completely replaced quickly, because there's always complexity, and there's always unanticipated complexity, and it takes time to figure out what the software needs to do. But in finance, the trend is very clear. For example, almost all equity trades, so buying and selling of stocks, is now done by algorithms and not done individually by human traders. There are the consumers, the retail traders, and they're doing their trades. They're deciding whether or not they want to buy or sell 100 shares of Apple. But then they're trading with a dealer, and that counterparty, the dealer, is automated. And it's turned out that it's easier to automate the trading of shares, Apple, Google, IBM, whatever, than it is to automate the trading of bonds. And so right now, if you take a snapshot of the finance industry, some parts of trading are much more automated than others, but all the parts that are less automated are moving in the direction of being more automated. And that was the trend that we saw when we started my current company, and we have see the same trend now. We create automation for trading municipal bonds, which are a $4 trillion asset class in the United States, which is particularly complicated and particularly manual currently. So we are at the forefront of moving automation a step further in finance, but we're not the only ones. And we're not immediately replacing human traders. We may never completely replace human traders, but we do some of the work for them, and we do some of the work that otherwise they would have human assistants and associates doing. And I think that's the trend across industries. The automation is incremental, but it continues, indefinitely. And so if you look from one year to the next, there isn't much change. But if you look over a span of 20 years, there can be a huge change.
Okay. Let's stick to this equity versus fixed income. So I actually worked at BlackRock Securities in New York.
Mm-hmm.
When I graduated college, and my work was fixed income securities. And since I'm on your website looking at FICC.ai, and it
Yes.
says you build AI foundation models to address the $100 trillion fixed income market. So
Yes.
firstly, what exactly are you doing? Are you helping price the municipal bonds? Are you helping with the trading? Like, what
Yes.
aspect are you?
Yeah, we help price the municipal bonds, and that is one of the important jobs of a human trader. And we call it a foundation model because it's really one machine learning model that is then easy to retarget for multiple different applications. So it's one model that you could say really understands municipal bonds. And the most important output of the model in real time is an estimated price for any bond that you're interested in. There's about 1 million different bonds. There's about 50,000 trades on a given day. And each trade provides a new piece of information about what is the level of prices in the market. And the relative prices of different bonds are pretty stable from day to day, but they're always changing a little bit. Maybe California bonds are increasing in value relative to Texas bonds or the other way around. And so our machine learning model is taking as input data and information about what's happening in the market and the descriptions of the bonds. And then you could say it's a layer of understanding. It creates knowledge on top of that information. It's a foundation model. And then the most immediate use for that foundation model is to estimate in real time what the reasonable value of a bond is. And that's the sort of work that a human associate would do on a trading desk. There's still a lot of other work that a human trader has to do. The human trader needs to find counterparties. The human trader needs to know whether he or she is motivated to buy this bond or is motivated not to buy it. If they are motivated to buy it, they'll offer a better price. But the reference is always some central notion of, what's the current reasonable price? And that's what our model provides. And then as our company grows, we'll be applying machine learning and software to, other parts of the business. So for example, when a university or a hospital or a city or a state wants to issue some new bonds, they need to design the bonds. Is it going to have a 4% interest rate, or is it going to have a 6% interest rate? And is it going to mature in 10 years or in 15 years? And with our software, we can estimate prices of hypothetical bonds, bonds that haven't yet been issued. And so our software will help do some of the work that the investment bankers do when they are issuing new bonds. And we're starting with municipal bonds, which, like I said, are a $4 trillion asset class. It's one of the most difficult areas of fixed income, but worldwide fixed income is order of magnitude 100 trillion. And there's similar problems in other types of fixed income. And so that's our long-term objective.
Okay, terrific. So and this could obviously extend then from municipal bonds to other bond categories, and then
Yes,
over to other structured products. And there's
yes,
obviously many structured products in the market. Okay.
yes,
Um, if you want to simplify it for a layman in terms of the technology that's gone behind what you're doing, because you use the word, people use the word machine learning and AI so
yes,
loose nowadays.
yes,
If you could just break it down, and as a professor, I'm sure you can do this.
yeah,
If you were to
yeah,
break it down in simpler terms, like what is
yeah,
really the underlying technology behind being able to do something like this?
yes. Well, I think there's two high-level components to the underlying technology. One you could call regression or correlation.
Mhm.
So, for example, a bond might be from the state of California, or it might be from the state of Texas, or it might be from the state of New York. And holding everything else constant, there's a different value for those states. And so our software is learning from data the different value from those states, and then it's extrapolating in real time to all bonds from those states. And so that's really learning correlations, that maybe holding all else constant, a Texas bond has a slightly higher price than a California bond. And then the other big part of what we do is we learn from the history of actual trades that have happened.
Mhm.
So if the recent trades in a bond have been at prices like 101, 102, 103, 101, then that tells you the range of values of the bond. But some of those trades are going to be more important, more informative than others. And so our software is learning that. And when it's processing a sequence of trades, it's actually using some machine learning technology, which is similar to what's used in generative AI nowadays, what's used in language models, because a sentence is a sequence of words and a paragraph is a sequence of sentences. And the meaning of each word in a sentence depends on the meaning of the other words. And the meaning of a sentence depends on the meaning of other sentences that are nearby. And for us, the meaning of a trade depends on the meaning of other trades. If
Mhm.
we have a $10,000 trade, but it was immediately followed by $1 million trade, then the $10,000 trade is really no longer important. The $1 million trade is much more important. So we can actually view trades as being a little bit similar to words in a sentence and use some of the same machine learning technology algorithms on that.
Okay, all right. So it seems like these functions could be done by humans, and traditionally we're using Excel models to do this. But
Yes.
is it just the quantum of data that the algorithm is now being able to process, and the speed at which it can process this data? Are those the two main sort of factors that have changed?
So the algorithms are actually using approximately the same data that humans are using. So the biggest difference you could say is speed, but the difference in speed is so enormous that it
Mm.
enables things that humans could never do. It might take a human, 30 minutes to analyze one bond. And there's a million bonds, and that analysis might need to be repeated every day. So that's completely infeasible for humans. But our software can analyze all million, and it can repeat that analysis every second in principle. And so now, you know, our software can let a trader continuously scan everything that's available in the market and then provide an alert maybe when something is available at a price which seems not reasonable. And that sort of scanning and alerting is not possible if you only have humans doing the analysis.
Okay, so you're saying it's the rate at which, so it's the speed at which it can analyze this data.
So the speed at which it can analyze the data is really the biggest differentiator from humans.
Mm.
And then the biggest differentiator in technology is that, this is artificial intelligence. The humans and the analysts have natural intelligence. And even 5 years ago, nobody knew the algorithms that would replicate the human intelligence. But the progress that has happened in deep learning, machine learning over the last 5 and 10 years has now given us the algorithms that can approximately replicate the conclusions that the humans are drawing, we still don't know exactly, how the humans are using their brains. We don't know what algorithm the brain is using, but we now have software algorithms that give approximately the same output from the same input, and that's sufficient for automation.
Okay, see, this is very interesting, and you touched upon like the last 5 years and how this machine learning field has evolved. If you could just sort of walk us through a little bit of the chronology, we don't have to take this back 100 years or whatever, but maybe a little
Yeah,
bit of the chronology of how this technology has advanced and where do you see it then going in the next 5 or 10 years?
yeah, yeah. Actually, the history is pretty clear. It was in the 1930s, so 90 years ago, that scientists really figured out that computers might be possible in principle and started developing the mathematics of computers. And then the first electronic computers were in the 1940s. And then in the 1950s, the first scientists started thinking seriously about artificial intelligence and whether computers could do things that are considered to require intelligence from humans, like play games. In particular, the game of checkers, which is a relatively easy game, but it's still a game that, they're human champions and humans enjoy playing it and feel that it's using their intelligence. That was the 1950s. And then there was continued scientific research and development and applications. In the 1980s, there was something called expert systems, which had some applications. If you're in the United States and you use TurboTax to fill in your tax return, then that's really a type of expert system. And what also came to prominence in the 1980s and the 1990s is neural networks, which is algorithms that are a little bit similar to the way a human brain or an animal brain might work. And in the 1990s, neural networks were successful for recognizing handwriting and also successful for recognizing patterns. Maybe is a credit card transaction fraudulent or is it legitimate? So that's been two real world successful applications of artificial intelligence since the 1990s. You don't have humans anymore who are reading handwritten checks. You have software which is reading the handwritten checks. And then in the 2010s, there was significant further progress in neural networks, and the field came to be called deep learning. And in particular, that's when deep learning algorithms started becoming as capable as humans at many different computer vision tasks, like just looking at an image and deciding, does this contain the face of a person? How many faces are in the picture? Or if a camera, where should the camera focus? If there's a face, probably the camera should focus on the face. So deep learning really came to the forefront in the 2010s. Just by the way, going back to the 1990s is when artificial intelligence algorithms first beat the human world champion at chess, which was quite a watershed moment because chess is considered to be one of the pinnacles of intelligence. And then in the 2010s with deep learning, it's first software that beat the human world champion at the game of Go, which is even more difficult than the game of chess. And then what's happened in the just in the last 5 years is new deep learning methods for processing language in particular. And probably most of the people who are listening to this or reading this, have used ChatGPT, have tried it out, and it's very impressive how it can answer questions, and it answers questions in a very coherent way. And it really seems like it understands the question and gives an answer that makes sense. And it can understand the context of the question. So it'll give different answers to the same question if the question is asked in different context. And that's all been progressed in the last 5 years in algorithms for understanding language.
Okay, so thank you for that amazing summary. And obviously, it seems like we've made like radical leaps and bounds, and we've come a long way.
Mhm.
Where is this going to go? If we've done all this in the last 100 years or so, and
Mhm.
with technology, I know like asking a question about 10 years is 10 years is
Yeah.
a to like a million years, right? So where do you think
Mhm.
this is going in the next year or two? How is if
Mhm.
we're already at a point where this thing's telling
Yeah.
us jokes and it's writing screenplays, etc. Where
Yeah.
what's going to shift in the next year or two?
Mhm. Well, I think in the next year or two, the current methods are going to become more precise. Um, uh, so it can, for example, yeah, ChatGPT can create a joke or can write a screenplay, but maybe it's not exactly what you want, and it's difficult to find the right instructions, the right prompts to make it give you exactly what you want. But that's a problem that pretty sure that people will be able to make a lot of progress on. So it's definitely going to become more precise, more useful. Whether it's going to, um, uh, become radically more autonomous and radically more creative. Like, one example that comes to mind, there's a recent very successful TV series which is called The White Lotus.
Sure.
And um, uh, you know, if there was a lot of human creativity in that, but there was also a lot of human skills. Whoever had the concept had to get support from a lot of other people, and the concept probably evolved. Um, uh, and whether an AI system can really be autonomous and can really do, I won't even say the high level parts of the job, because it's very much a combination of high level. On the one hand, you need to have the high level idea. On the other hand, you need to have the low level skills, just to get an appointment with the people you need to get an appointment with, to try and persuade them to join you
Mm.
in creating this TV series. So these, one thing these generative AI systems definitely do not have currently is the ability to be autonomous and take initiative.
Okay. But do you see that coming in the next 2 years? The precision might.
Um, uh, it's not clear. It's not clear how much people will want systems to be autonomous and take initiative. I think they will want them to, take initiative on a small scale. Like, for example, if I'm a customer of Amazon and I ordered something and it hasn't arrived and I'm calling customer service, then the customer service agent should take the initiative to look for information in this database and look for information in that database. So I think we are going to want these systems to take the initiative that humans are taking without even thinking about continually when they're doing their job or even when they're interacting with their friends and family. You
Mm,
know, um, uh, you just might be just meeting your friends and somebody might say, "Hey, it's getting late. Is everyone hungry? Shall we find somewhere to go and have dinner?"
okay. Okay. But I mean, you can obviously program triggers, right? You can program a trigger saying after 7 p.m., then
Yeah.
look for this, or if
But
someone's.
I think one of the keys is that really everything is subtle and complicated. So even if you normally have dinner at 7:30 p.m., it might not be because it's 7:30 p.m. It's just that normally you have a snack at 4 p.m. and then normally you get hungry again about 3 hours later. So if you happen to have your snack at 5 p.m., then you wouldn't want to have dinner at 7 p.m.
Sure, sure. Okay. All right. I want to talk a little bit about the adoption of AI from, is this, yeah, how are you seeing this pan out, right? Because sure, today consumers like me could use Chat GPT to like help me with my social media posts or help me with basic stuff.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
when as a small business owner, when I look at AI and I went on Google had a little online workshop to explain it, and it was so technical and so complicated that after the first hour I was like, I don't understand this. This looks to be something for developers and coders to build.
Mhm.
So where do you see this adoption of how is AI going to become all pervasive? Because the believers say it's AI is everywhere, everything, but as a
Mhm.
consumer, I'm just like, wait a minute, maybe I'm using Google Maps, so I'm using it subconsciously and subtly, but from a larger force. But as an everyday person, I'm just like, I don't know how do I interact with this technology, and how do I make it mine? So how is this adoption going to happen to make it all pervasive?
Mhm. And I think the adoption is going to happen really the same way that adoption has happened of other technologies, of just making it very easy, making it very simple, and then making it actually do something that either people want or that companies really want. You know, the ideal for a company would be that if you talk to customer service, you don't even know that you're talking to an AI system.
Mm.
Um, and companies are very motivated to reduce the cost of customer service. And so there's hundreds of startups that are trying to work out the specifics of using AI for customer service. And then there are hundreds of large companies that are trying to work out the specifics for themselves internally. And then there are hundreds of consulting firms, you know, the Infosys of this world, that are trying to work out how to do the same so that then they can provide that to their clients. Um, uh, so, you know, in some sense, you know, the technology is going to get propagated by capitalism, by um, uh, people taking initiative, and you know, very small companies you know, may not have the people and may not have the resources to take the initiative, and then they're going to become customers for other companies that are taking the initiative. But a lot of these companies that are taking the initiative, you know, like startups always, they're going to fail. And why are they going to fail? Because their product is too complicated, or because it doesn't solve a real problem, or because it creates as many problems as it solves.
Okay, so you're saying it'll become like SaaS products. Like we had software as a service, you're going to have SaaS products for AI, and then companies can say, "Oh, I want to pay a subscription fee for this
Yes.
customer service AI tool."
Yeah. Yeah. Um, uh, and from a consumer point of view, there are going to be new products, new services, which are just going to be better than the competition because they use AI one way or the other. Um, uh, you know, right now, if you want to play tennis, you need somebody to play tennis with.
Sure.
So maybe there's going to be some AI robot that you'll be able to play tennis with just by yourself. But when you play tennis with another person, you know, there's a whole social aspect to it. It's much more than just hitting a ball with a racket. And so, some people, some companies, some entrepreneurs are going to figure this out, and then some are going to try, but they're not going to succeed.
Okay, okay. So you're saying the adoption is going to happen. Capitalism is as always going to sort of lead the charge, and then depending on where this osmosis settles, is where you
Yes.
sort of find
Mhm.
some
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
equilibrium forming.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think the question on adoption has been satisfactorily addressed. Can we talk a little bit about what's going on the policy front? Um,
Yes.
where do we stand on policy making today, and
Mhm.
how do you see this evolving? Is this going to be a state matter? Is this going to be done at the federal level? Is this going to become a global policy? Like how is policy making evolving?
Mhm. Again, I think it's probably evolving like other policy making. So it's happening at all levels. I just read this morning, apparently there's at least 50 different pieces of AI legislation that have been introduced
Mhm.
in the 50 different United States. There's certainly the White House and Congress are paying attention to it. Other countries are paying a lot of attention. So it's going to be confusing. There's going to be overlapping regulations. Um, I think what's more important to think about in the long term is, are the regulations going to succeed or are they going to fail? And what about the bad actors who just ignore the regulation or find loopholes in it? Um, uh, it's possible to have too little regulation. It's possible to have too much regulation also. That's probably going to happen. There's probably going to be some jurisdictions where there's going to be too much regulation, and it's good, and that's going to hurt the people living in those jurisdictions. There have already been some small examples of this. Like I think maybe 6 months ago, ChatGPT was banned briefly in Italy, but there was, a backlash. People wanted to use it, and so somehow the ban was lifted. Um, uh, but I think a much more, long-term problem is, you know, the goals of regulation are really, to protect individuals, to protect society. Fine. But what about the actors who are bad actors who want to attack? And it could be one country attacking another country. There's plenty of evidence that countries which are hostile to the United States, used social media to spread lies and to influence recent elections in the United States. And, they were certainly breaking American law, but they didn't care that they were breaking American law. So, American regulation is not going to stop serious bad actors. And same in other countries.
Okay, so I mean, this is like like in any other space, right? Like you have bad actors and sort of negative factions in any society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the role of governments to form policy and legislation, and then hope that
Yes.
that the world follows through. But when we talk about policy, and you said 50 pieces of legislation are as of now on hold or have just been submitted. What kind of legislation needs to evolve? Like if you could explain, like what is the kind of what kind of policies do we need to keep this in some sort of checks and balances?
I honestly don't have a good answer to that question. The way that I think about it is maybe there's three levels at which policy is relevant. So one level you could say is the lowest level, which is, you know, we have a consensus about privacy, we have a consensus about fairness, we have a consensus about explainability, and you know, good actors, actors who are in the system and want to be part of the system, like companies, especially larger companies, they're going to self-regulate and they're going to follow the regulation. And there's going to be occasional mistakes. And there's going to be episodes where an AI system does something which is unfair, but the good actors are going to be motivated to to solve those problems and to work with government to find reasonable regulation. So that's the first level, and that's a level I'm not too concerned about. And then I think the second level is the bad actors, and that's a level that I'm very concerned about. Well, I think an analogy is spam phone calls, spam emails. Over the last 20 years, there have been many laws that try to prevent or reduce spam. And almost all those laws have simply failed because the bad actors have found loopholes or have just not even bothered to comply, or they've just moved to a different location where they don't need to comply. So that's the level that I'm really concerned with. And then the third level, people talk about, what about super intelligence?
Mm.
What about the singularity? What about, the AIs, deciding to conquer humans and take over the world? And um, uh, that's something that we don't, it's a theoretical possibility. I don't think it's a real possibility with current technology. Technology is going to improve. It's not impossible, but it's not something I think that we need to or even we can really worry about right now. So it's that middle level that I'm concerned about.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, and since we are on the topic of AI and policy, I want to dig a little bit deeper on data, right? Because data is ultimately it's everything. It's the backbone of all this AI and ML. So who in the current system, who owns the data as we stand today, and
Yeah.
where do you see this evolution of data ownership going to? Because
Hmm.
it sounds like the where the data is where the power is, and then that's where the money is.
Yeah.
So where's
Yeah.
that? How do you see that balance playing out?
Um, I think the same two levels are relevant. Again, there are the good actors, and the good actors are going to want to do more or less the right thing. Something that I think a lot of people don't appreciate is that most data actually has relatively little value, and most data loses its value quite quickly. Like, you know, what I purchased recently in e-commerce might be relevant for making me recommendations for what I should purchase next. But what I purchased a year ago in e-commerce probably has little relevance for making recommendations for me now. So I'm sort of more relaxed than many people about data ownership, and I'm more relaxed about the bad things that can happen by data leaking, by data being shared. Already, for example, many people are concerned that their identity is going to be stolen, that they're going to lose money from their bank account because their identity has been stolen. But actually, so many identities have been stolen already that I think the availability of personal information is not the limiting factor for the bad guys.
Mm.
They have to do work to use that data. And I think it's that work which is the limiting factor, not the mere availability of data. So, on the first level of, regulation and good actors, I'm not too concerned. But I think, there's a lot of reason to be concerned at the second level. Like, imagine if there were some candidates for president
Mm.
and you know, let's say a foreign country favored candidate A, and everybody's got things that they're embarrassed about. If this foreign country has information on candidate B and uses it to persuade candidate B to withdraw from the election, blackmail, embarrassment, whatever, that's the and that can happen on a much smaller scale. Maybe there's senior executives at a company, and somebody on the outside has a preference for which one should become CEO. Then somebody on the outside could use data on the different candidates to maybe blackmail some of the candidates.
Mm. Okay.
So again, it's this second level of the actors who are just not who don't want to do the right thing that I'm concerned about.
Okay, so you're worried about the second layer, and obviously we all worry about the second layer. But I just
Mhm,
want to nudge you a little bit on the first layer.
mhm,
If if you have companies like if you have Google and Microsoft and let's say four or five players own
mhm,
most of this data, don't you see this as another sort of concentration of power, another oligopoly forming, and this is
mhm,
not just relevant to the United States, right? You'll have basically they become large swaths of data and they own global data, making them immensely
mhm.
powerful. So does
Yeah.
that thought not bother you?
Mhm. It is concentration of power, but I think if you look even over the medium term, it's always evolving. Um, uh, TikTok is a big threat to Facebook, and even Facebook itself is it's sort of inevitable that it's in decline, and Meta, the company, the asset which is potentially growing is Instagram, but Instagram is threatened by Facebook. Um, uh, Google is threatened by OpenAI. Amazon is threatened by Temu. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I think most data, almost all data, loses its value very quickly.
Mm.
So Temu doesn't care that they only have 1 year's worth of data on shopping. And
Mm.
it's no benefit to Amazon that they have 20 years worth of data on shopping.
Mm. Okay. All right. So, and I mean, obviously, the example you gave in the e-retailing space is yeah, you're right. In 1 year's data doesn't make a difference. But when you're trying to understand consumer patterns and behavior, in other industries, or if a company in very soon could have an entire graph of all my habits, not just my purchasing habits, but all my behavior, because I spend most of my time on my computer, and if they have
Mhm.
access to this sort of data imprint, I mean, you do need large amounts of data to build some sort of graph, right, of a
Mhm.
human being. You're saying you're not too worried about this. You're not too worried
Yeah,
about as a
yeah. I'm 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 not too worried about it because I think it always comes back to, what are you going to do with it? What's the benefit of it? So actually, in the United States, for 15 years now, there are companies that have been building graphs of the entire population
Mm,
and what services do they subscribe to? Who's your cell phone company? Who's your cable TV company? Who's your streaming TV company? And um, uh, the main thing that they use this information for is to try to reduce fraud.
mm,
Somebody might order something online and then, not even their own address, and they steal the package and so on. So in this, I think information, specific information can have high value, but a lot of information just doesn't have as high value as people imagine.
Okay, wow. Okay, great. That's a very interesting contrary point perspective, because it's not what I've been hearing in a lot of conversations. So I'm glad you brought this up, and it's a refreshing and heartening perspective, because otherwise the world just seems like a very scary place if five companies are going to own, everyone's information. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit to education, right? Because we spoke a little bit about AI and tech. We've spoken about your work in finance. Let's speak about education. How are you seeing, there's the whole edtech space evolve? We have theories of like people saying, oh, it's going to help radically change in developing countries like India, where 300 million people don't have access to a classroom and teachers, and AI is going to come and take over. And then you talk to someone in India at the grassroots level, and they say, hey, we don't even have electricity. What are you talking about? So where do you stand in this debate, and what is the magical power of AI in education, and what can it really do?
Mhm. I think it's going to be somewhere in between. It's interesting what you said about, in a village in India, maybe they don't even have electricity. One of the fundamental facts about information is that it requires almost no energy. So, if you have a solar panel, you can charge your smartphone. And if you have a smartphone, you can have access to all that education. It's much easier to give people access to education than it is to give them access to, say, clean air.
Mm,
Um, uh, and so, I think the limiting factors are going to be human nature. Online education has been around for decades. It was 10 years ago, I think, that massive online open courses, MOOCs, became really fashionable,
sure,
but they haven't transformed the world. And the number of people, the percent of people who start a MOOC course and then the percent who finish it is maybe only 1%.
sure,
So I think it's really all about, motivation and engagement. And in education, like in other areas, there's always hundreds, thousands of startups, and some of them will be addressing the right problem and have the right angle and have the right sales and the right distribution and will build something successful. Um, my personal opinion is that in education, it's really critical to understand the psychology of it. Um, uh, and that happens at all levels. You know, there's certain one thing which is very important in education is brand name. There are brand name universities where people want to attend, and they don't really know why they want to attend them, except that it's a brand name.
sure. Sure. Yeah. Anyway, so the brand name can also perpetuate, and like, they could, take that brand name to every nook and corner and village of the world if they wanted to. I think
Yes, but then that might devalue the brand name.
Sure, sure. But when they say, AI in education and it can personalize the learning experience, is that a far-fetched thought, or do you really think that AI can genuinely personalize based on different learning styles and learning pedagogies, etc.?
Well, I'm not a psychologist or an education researcher, but I do have colleagues who are, and I think there's a lot of myths in education. My colleagues who are experts say that learning style is one of the myths,
Mm,
and um, uh, personalization in the sense of really one-on-one tutoring and adapting, minute by minute and day by day to what a single student needs. Yeah, that's really important. But, you know, and personalization in the sense of, this student is good at this subject and really interested in this subject, and that's important. But you know, I think that's actually what the existing high quality educational institutions provide. It's easy to go into a school and to go into a classroom and you see 30 children and maybe a few of them are sitting in the front and really paying attention and learning, and the majority of them are bored and not learning. So yeah, they need personalization.
sure.
Um, it's too expensive to use humans to provide that personalization. And so with artificial intelligence, absolutely, in principle, we can provide that individual attention. But maybe I would think of it in terms of individual attention and doing what we already know works, as opposed to something like personalization, maybe that you might think of as something that is brand new.
Okay, okay, terrific. Okay, so you seem to be optimistic. You seem to be a believer in AI. It can solve for a personalized learning experience. Okay,
Yeah.
and where do you stand on this man versus or with a machine dynamic? Are we really going to see robots take over our classrooms? Like, you teach. You're a professor. You've been through this experience.
Mhm.
Are we really going to see some form of replacement or even co-botting with a professor and a robot in the same classroom? Or are these notions just very far-fetched?
Mhm. Well, there's some technologies that are still very far-fetched. One technology which is far-fetched is physical robots.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and another technology which is very far-fetched is a software agent that has the flexibility and has the initiative and has the autonomy of a human. So, if think of a TV news show where you have two anchors and the anchors are talking to each other as well as talking to the audience. And the anchors are being spontaneous and reacting to each other. That's still pretty far-fetched from an artificial intelligence point of view. And so I don't think either of those scenarios, physical robots or co-teachers that are acting like humans, that's not on the horizon for education. But what's absolutely on the horizon for education is, you know, videos of good teachers and students preferring to watch those rather than go to a lecture with their boring teacher. And what's absolutely on the horizon is, interactive, question answering. The student asks questions and gets answers from something like ChatGPT. And then also something like ChatGPT asks the student questions and then evaluates the correctness of the student's answer. And then based on that, teaches them something or asks them follow-up questions. So there is going to be more and more software replacing humans
Mm,
in education. And then I think an open long-term question is student motivation and engagement.
mhm,
Um, you know, again, a good teacher can create motivation and engagement, at least in the students who are sitting in the front of the class.
sure.
Um, can Can software create motivation and engagement with no human? I don't know.
Okay.
And software create motivation and engagement in 100% of students? I don't know.
Okay, okay, sure. Okay, great. Okay, very interesting. Let's move to well, as I'm moving towards the end of this conversation, I want to touch upon skills for sure. As you're a professor, you're highly skilled in your personal capacity. First, if you had to go back to college in this era, and I know you have your PhD in computer science, what would you study if you had to go do a fresh undergrad degree if you were 16, 17, whatever? What would
Mhm.
you study? Like what would you advocate that young kids study at the undergraduate level today?
Mhm. I would advocate that they study anything that is challenging and that they're genuinely interested in, and that as a tiebreaker, they should choose to study something which has been a field of study for a longer time. Because if something has lasted longer in the past, it's probably going to last longer in the future. Like in 100 years from now, we're still going to have departments of history. So studying history is not going to become obsolete. Um, uh, but if if you study current artificial intelligence technology, that's probably going to be obsolete, maybe not in 10 years' time, but in 20 years' time. And I do think that um, you know, using the brain is somewhat like using the muscles. It's very important to get exercise. It's not so important whether you play tennis or whether you go swimming. And it's very important to learn and to develop thinking skills. It's not so important whether you're studying Sanskrit or Chinese.
Mhm.
It's
Okay.
even not so important whether you're studying Sanskrit or mathematics.
Okay. So you're giving me a response where you're saying I got two things from this. You said pick something that's challenging and pick something that's lasted long. Like now with and you're a professor in technology, your work is in tech.
Mhm,
Are you then advocating that you should, if I sign up for any tech curriculum today, and the universities are trying to be current, right? So they're going to try to teach us whatever is current, but as you're rightly saying, that current is going to become dated very soon. So what
mhm,
happens to computer science departments and programs then?
mhm.
Because it's a catch-22 situation. If they don't teach us what's current, then we don't know what's going on.
Well, in computer science departments, like all departments, they need to find a balance between staying current and staying useful over the long term. Um, uh, and I see many colleges out there. I see many universities which are chasing fashions and chasing fads, and also chasing customers and making it easy so as to get more customers.
Okay, okay, all right. That's a very interesting perspective once again. In terms of skills, if we leave aside the degree component and just move to pure skilling,
Mhm,
how should somebody young think about the future in terms of skill readiness to hit the workspace?
mhm, mhm.
What would you say are the top three, four, five skills that?
Um, Probably the number one is initiative.
Mhm.
And maybe the number two is, independent thinking, not being one of the crowd. Um, uh, right now, something which is happening in the United States is, literally hundreds, probably 1,000 colleges and universities have created master's programs, which they call data analytics, data science, data something. And suddenly the graduates of those programs are hitting a wall. Um, uh, Suddenly the supply and demand has shifted, and there's an oversupply of these master's graduates. Um, uh, and I've seen many resumes, and all these resumes sound the same.
Mm.
They have the same keywords, they have the same projects, they have the same cliches. And what do they all have the same? they also all have, almost all have the same, they have low quality English.
Mm.
ChatGPT writes better English than 99% of master's degree graduates. So writing really high quality English is clearly the rare skill. Being able to use Python libraries is no longer the rare skill.
Sure. Okay. So it seems like you're leaning towards a liberal arts education for and advocating for liberal arts education.
Um, yes, I'm advocating for whatever is challenging and whatever has real long-term value.
Okay, all right, okay. And I'll take the last question, Professor, with this. When we speak about the world and the future that's coming, and of course, most people, for most people, education is a means to an end, and that end is obviously a job that helps them sustain. So, going forward, what are certain job categories that you feel are just gonna just be annihilated? And are there new job categories that don't exist in our vocabulary today that you think will become a potential reality?
Mhm. So there's definitely going to be new job categories, categories that we can't even think of now. Um, uh, and I don't think it's so much that any particular job category is going to be annihilated. If they are, it's going to be very slow. Like, for example, a telephone operator. Um, uh, it doesn't exist nowadays, but it didn't disappear overnight, or it didn't even disappear in 1 decade. Um, uh, but every job really is going to be evolving in its content. Um, uh, you know, marketing, digital marketing now, I think, is the majority of marketing. Certainly, most advertising spending is now digital as opposed to physical. And again, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen over a period of 10 or 20 years. And so again, people need to be really independent thinkers and see for themselves where their own job and their own job category is going, and then take the initiative and move to a new job category if that seems to be a growing job category.
Okay. So what you're saying is these jobs aren't going to disappear, just the job descriptions might get modified. How you do marketing will change.
Yes, yes. And then there are certain categories of jobs where it's clear that there is unmet demand, that which are really, I mean, a lot of personal service jobs, in particular teaching and nursing. I mean, almost everybody would agree that the world would be better if we had more teachers and we had more nurses.
Sure.
Um, uh, and those are physical jobs that involve human interaction. So those are not currently being automated by, you can't put them in a laptop.
Sure. Okay. So those jobs you're saying are sort of more here to stay, and hopefully
Mhm.
we'll see some sort of robust growth. Okay, terrific. Thank you, Professor. This was amazing. Amazing insights. I learned a lot from you, and was really unique in your conversation is a contrarian perspective, which
Mhm.
you deliver with so much panache and with
Mhm.
such subtlety. That's what I really liked about your conversation. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to weaving in all your thoughts and perspectives into the book. And hopefully, it'll help many, many millions of people here in India and worldwide. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Vibha. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.